Hey Maribel, hey Love for Immigrants, thank you so much for having me for your virtual web series about mindfulness, emotional resilience, healing, and art. I just wanted to talk to you guys for a couple minutes about my own journey through that process and maybe give you guys some tips on what you can do for yourselves. Um, so, my name is Kevin. I'm the site manager here at a COVID testing center here in LA. I work for CORE, which is Community Organized Relief Effort. So, awesome organization. Um, yeah, so a little bit about me. I grew up in East LA, which is, if you don't know, if you're not from the LA area. Hey, sorry guys, had a quick work call. Um, yeah, so anyways, I grew up here in East LA. So if you've never been to Los Angeles, I grew up in a very Hispanic, immigrant, underserved uh, community, definitely underprivileged. Um, where people average education attainment, no one really made it past high school, and you were considered an outlier if you weren't pregnant by 18. So that just kind of gives you the background, a little bit of a background of where I grew up. My father was born in Tijuana, and migrated over when he was a kid, so I was first generation, and I was blessed enough to have a parent like him who really advocated for education and learning. Um, so while a lot of like my other like uncles were all affiliated, gangbang, and all that stuff, I was focused on the books, so to speak. Um, yeah, so, and I think that whether you're growing up in any part of the US, I think a big problem that a lot of our communities face, and I'll talk a little bit more about when we get into to some of these things that I told you I talk about, but intergenerational trauma, the pain that we take on from their parents, from our parents who took it on from their parents, and so on and so forth, right? And I think something to say about intergenerational trauma is that unless you're working on yourself using tools like emotional regulation and mindfulness, you're going to pass it on to the next generation whether you want to or not. So one thing that I always like to tell Latinx communities and for communities for people of color is that you have so many elements of your community that already make it difficult, whether it's, like lack of resources, lack of, employment outcomes, or whatever it may be. We have all these stressors that we're always having to deal with. Maybe elements of violence and things of like that. And so it's a hard enough community to live in, and we don't live in a vacuum or a bubble where we're immune from that, and neither are our families or wherever they came from. They're inheriting all of that trauma, and they're passing it on to us, and we're passing it on to our kids. So unless we are very deliberate and very intentional about breaking that vicious cycle, that wheel is going to keep spinning, and it's going to keep going from one generation to the next. Um, and just kind of something on that note. So you're saying, okay, well, healing, where does it start? What do I do? I kind of don't know how to approach it, or even what I should be doing when it comes to healing. Um, and so this is where mindfulness and these investigative tools are so helpful. Because when we think of mindfulness, what people usually think of is like some monk sitting in a temple, clearing his mind and not having any thoughts for a couple hours. When really, all mindfulness is an internal emotional investigation. So what does that mean? Well, I think in our daily life, and I'm mainly referring to pre-COVID, but think about yourself, you, you as a person. You have your family life, dating life, social life, work life, friends. Um, you have all of these things that are competing and fracturing your attention all the time, right? So, how much time in a given day do you actually have to sit with your own thoughts, with your own needs, with really with yourself? And I'm not talking like the social media superficial stuff. I mean those core things that are really who you are. And especially if we have a lot of pain, if we have a lot of unresolved trauma, then you can't even really start to heal it unless you are able to sit down and work with it, right? So, emotional investigation, mindfulness, right? What does mindfulness mean? Well, like I said, it's just sitting there, sitting with yourself, cutting out all other distractions and saying, okay, let me sit here. Let me just close my eyes and let me just see how I feel. How does my mind feel? How does my spirit feel? How does my heart feel? How does my body feel? And you're just listening. You're listening to each part of yourself and you're seeing how they're connecting and relating to each other. You might sit there and realize, wow, I'm really unhappy right now. I am just I'm just not very happy. So why is that? Why am I not happy? You might be like, well, maybe I'm working, maybe I'm dating someone. Man, I'm not happy. I don't get it. And that's where having this emotional toolkit comes in my mind, is one of the most valuable things you can have for yourself, right? So first, right, let's say I'm feeling angry, right? Let's say I'm really feeling upset. I'm really angry about the world, or I'm just angry and I don't know why I'm angry, right? Well, all emotions have frequencies. What do I mean by that? Within the emotion, there's an entire domain, a whole range of emotion. On one end, it's a light version of the emotion. So let's say if I'm angry, well, am I annoyed or am I furious? And those two binaries are very different, right? If I'm annoyed and I'm furious, those are two different frequencies of anger. So the first thing we want to do after we've identified the emotion is identify the frequency at which we feel it, right? And then how long, the duration of that frequency. If I'm annoyed, let's say someone cuts me off, I might be annoyed for a couple minutes, might even sit with me for 30 minutes, but maybe I let it go after that. Who cares? But what if I'm angry and it's been years that I've been angry? Wow, now we have a starting point, right? So now you're taking, it's like almost like you're doing an internal inventory of your own feeling world. Man, how am I feeling? Why am I feeling like this? This is kind of something that it's what's going on, and how do I need to address it, right? So then from there, break down those feelings, go from the 30,000 feet level to the microscopic level, right? We're gonna zoom in as much as we can to investigate that part of ourselves. So I'm angry, right? In this example, I'm angry. And let's say every time I see Maribel, who is awesome, and thank you, I think your organization is super cool. Orale, that's what's up. I love what you're doing here for Love for Immigrants. But let's pretend, Maribel, that I'm very upset at you. And just every time I see you, I'm like, oh, okay? Well, one, I've identified the emotion. Okay, I'm angry. I've identified the frequency. I'm always just furious. I'm seething every time I see Maribel. Ay, Mari, that girl. Man, she drives me insane. She drives me crazy. Okay? But why though, right? That's mindfulness asks, why do we feel the way that we do? Right? Because while we can't control how we feel, we can control how we respond. And we can also use mindfulness to find out the root cause of that emotion. Right? So, I see Mari. I'm always angry when I see her. Why? Well, let's go. So here we have our episode, our emotional event. We go before the event. Okay? So what's getting me? What's getting me to this point that I'm in? It's called, we're breaking it down, right? So here's my anger. Well, what happened before that? Maybe somebody cut me off. Maybe I ordered food and they got the wrong order. Maybe I got yelled at by my boss. And I have all these little things that are adding up, that are just kind of fuel to the flame, you know what I mean? That are just kind of waiting to explode inside me. And then I see Mari, right? She triggers me. Well, what's a trigger? A trigger is something that makes you respond in a certain way, right? That elicits or evokes an emotional response from you. Okay? So I see Mari. Oh man, I'm furious, right? And maybe it's because every time I see Mari, she refuses to say hello to me. And maybe from my own past, I'm very insecure about people not acknowledging me, about not giving me validation through greeting. Maybe that's something that's really important to me. Other people don't think about it, but to me, I take it as the highest form of disrespect because that's my own emotional database. So now I know, oh shoot, hey Kevin, this is an insecurity you have. Every time you interact with this person, she's going to trigger you. So then what do we examine next? What are the physical and psychological responses we have to those triggers, right? Maybe I clench my fist, my body gets tight. Maybe I'm like grinding my teeth. I bite my lip. I pull my hair. I'm like, oh my goodness, this girl, I can't with her, right? So what is that response? And what's the psychological response? What are my thoughts? I'm like, oh, I wish something bad would happen to her, right? And then what happens after that? Am I re-triggering myself? What am I doing? Sarah? What am I doing? Right?
Vote for Sarah?
So that's just a very basic level. If you would like to learn more about this, there's a wonderful mindfulness intervention program called Cultivating Emotional Balance, created by Dr. Paul and Eve Ekman. Awesome. Look it up. Look at their research and read the stuff they've done about emotional intelligence and emotional regulation. It's awesome. Okay? So once we understand ourselves, we can start relating to people around us. Either people within our own communities, people outside of our communities. And I'll give you a really cool example or interesting example. I had the privilege of working overseas for 5 years. I worked in Southern Africa and East Africa and Southeast Asia. When I was stationed in Swaziland, I was dating a girl there, and for some reason, her and I were just always. It's because we came from two very different realities, two very different emotional realities. We were saying the same words. We were talking about, at least I thought the same things, but they had very different meaning and value. So once you have the awareness to inspect yourself, you can use that when you have dynamics with other people, with other communities, when you're observing suffering or privilege in other communities. These are tools you have, right? And so I think of it this way. These mindfulness practices, right? And by the way, a few more things because I don't want to keep you guys too long. People, a lot of what you see when they talk about mindfulness, people always say, oh, we want you to feel good, and it's always about feeling happy and positive. It's not about that, right? Mindfulness is about having the emotional tool belt that when you're faced with adversity, with struggles, with just things happening in life, that you're not going to be like a kite in a storm. and you're just being surrendered, being controlled by the currents around you. You have no stability, right? That's not what that is. Mindfulness is that anchor. So while the storm's around you, you might get pulled a little bit this way, but you're keeping your center. And I think that's probably the most important part that people don't talk about.
Puts to lane 4, check-in 4.
You might sometimes feel sad, you might feel angry sometimes, you might feel upset, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you're doing mindfulness wrong.
Puts to check-in 4.
So I just want to let you guys know that I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist. This is something that I've just invested in for myself because healing the own trauma within my family, within my own life, within my community is something that's really important to me. And it starts with you, and then you can bring it out to other people. You can use these skills to set boundaries with other people, but you can use it to understand yourself and the people around you. And remember, guys, healing is not linear. It's not like a video game where you're clearing levels. Some days you take 5 steps forward, and other days you take 10 steps back, and that's okay. So remember that on this path to healing, that you save love and compassion for yourself, that you save some of that warmth and light that you want to give to the world, save some for you too. You can say, you know what? We all have demons that we're fighting. We all have struggles and weaknesses and insecurities, and that's okay because those are part of who you are, and that's beautiful too. So accept who you are and just use these skills to work with those struggles. And over time, you'll find ways to cope and develop and hopefully heal. So how does this tie in to art? Okay, what does art have to do with this? Well, if we're stressed, if we're angry, if we're feeling these really intense emotions that can kind of control us, we want to be able to develop healthy healing habits, right? And I think this is where art is so crucial. For me, I love to write poetry and I love to write short stories. And for me, whenever I have something stuck in my chest, it's like catharsis. It just calms me down, relaxes me, and provides a really healing element. So maybe for you, it's creating something, maybe drawing, painting, music, whatever that is for you. Okay, maybe it's like even writing comedy, writing a play, whatever that is. Okay, whatever that creative outlet is for you. Make sure that that's one of the tools you keep in your tool belt, because what you don't want to do is turn to negative coping things like becoming dependent on alcohol, on drugs, or on other things that can have a deleterious impact on your life. I'm sure all of you are very smart, wonderful, capable people who are like, yeah, Kevin, I got that. I already know. But those are just my thoughts. Those are my opinions. Again, hopefully you take time to digest some of this stuff. And you know what, guys? In the path to healing, it's okay to ask other people for help. Right now, I'm seeing a therapist, and it's honestly one of the best things. I'm 31. It's one of the best things I've ever done in my entire life. So we have, as a society in the US, we kind of don't prioritize mental health, art, healing, but we absolutely should. And hopefully, you can all can achieve that peace and happiness that I hope you find for yourself. And so, remember too, guys, that mindfulness doesn't belong to a tradition or people. I think I've said this again. I've recorded this like 10 times, and I'm not sure what I've included in what version, but just remember that mindfulness, at least how I found mindfulness, I found it through Catholicism. You can find it through Buddhism, Taoism, or you can find it secularly. It doesn't have to be through anything like that. So there's so many avenues that you can go and experience mindfulness. And remember, we're all on this healing path together. Let's bring love, support, kindness, and compassion. And I'll just leave you with one story that I heard, this Buddhist story that's just awesome. So there once was a cousin of one of the Buddha's disciples, one of his apprentices. It was his cousin, who, for whatever reason, didn't like the Buddha. And when he met the Buddha, he was hurling insults. He was being disrespectful and rude. And then he noticed the Buddha didn't react. He was just kind of like, he was cool. Didn't have any emotion. And he's like, I don't understand. Why aren't you responding in kind with anger? I just have insulted you, I've demeaned you, and yet you haven't responded back with anger. And the Buddha said, if you go over somebody's house and they offer you food and you reject it, where does it go? And he says, oh, it comes back to the owner. Whoever gave the food, if they don't accept it, it comes back to you. I said, exactly. It's the same thing with anger. If people choose to treat us poorly, we don't have to accept that negativity. That negativity can just stay with them. So I hope you all have a blessed day, keeping you all in my prayers. And I know in this time of political divisiveness, I hope that we can all stay together and make the world a better place. Maribel, thank you so much. Love for immigrants. I hope you have a great day. Take care.